All right, let's get started with Code.org's Computer Science Discoveries, Unit 3, Lesson 8. We're going to learn about sprites today. So we're going to jump in. And this first level is one of the many prediction levels that start out with Code.org. So it wants you to read the code below and try to predict what will happen, write your predictions, and press a button. And this is optional. Come up with 2 what-if questions that you wonder about the code. So whatever feels good. So what if I forget to use draw sprites? What if I don't use set animation? What would happen? If you don't put this draw sprites command, then nothing will be drawn. The screen would be blank. If you don't use set animations, you're only going to see gray squares. So just a quick overview of what a sprite is. A sprite is essentially an object that's being created through the Code.org platform. And I refer to it as a placeholder for an image. So you first have to create the placeholder, then you assign an actual picture to that placeholder. So if you look right here, you see a variable being created called fruit, and then we create a sprite at an XY location of 100, 200. Then once it's been created, this placeholder, we say, okay, I want to set the animation of that placeholder I called fruit with the image of an apple. All right. And then same thing for a vegetable. And then this call or draw sprites is what actually tells it to draw them on the screen. All right. Level 2. I'll start over. All right, so this one wants us to start from scratch, so create a new sprite variable called sprite1. Not my favorite way to do it. I would do something more meaningful, but we will call it sprite1. And then draw your sprites on this screen. And we run, and there we see just the gray square, again, just the placeholder, okay, that's being inserted at 200, 200. Now, even though this is a rectangle, this is different than the drawing of a rectangle command that we use. So notice the center of the sprite is also the XY position. So if I go to 200, 200, that's dead center of that. All right, level 3. Okay, this program should create 2 sprites, but only one is showing. Okay, again, this draw sprites command, whenever you call it, the order of your code matters. So if I call it after I say, hey, I'm creating a placeholder called left sprite, and then I say draw it, it's going to draw it, but then once I create right sprite, that's after the call to draw it, so it's not showing up. I don't have to do another draw sprites. I just need to move that below where I've created it and reset run, and now I can see both. All right, moving on to level 4, and I do apologize. I keep having to change my version history. That's from doing this previously with another class. And hopefully it won't lag too much. Okay, so this one, we want to update the code below so different animations appear for the fruit and vegetable sprites. All right, so right now when I run it, I have an apple and a carrot that are showing up side by side. I want to make it look like the picture and have a strawberry and broccoli vertically stacked. So I'm not going to change the name of the sprite. The sprite is the placeholder. I want to change the animation that is being set. So for the fruit, I want to change that to a picture of a strawberry. For the vegetable, I want to change that to a picture of a broccoli. So notice I just click the drop down menu. In a couple of levels we'll see how you can add things with the animations tab that will soon appear. We don't have it yet. And now when I reset and run, I've successfully changed the images. So again, I didn't have to do anything with fruit. That was just creating the placeholder. I didn't rename that. I changed the image that was being set to that placeholder. All right, now to stack them top and bottom instead of side by side, that is centered in the screen, so my X would need to be 200. And really, I'm just inverting. I'll make that a 100. I'll make that a 200 and make that a 300. So now they have the same X position, but the fruit placeholder sprite, which is going to be the image of a strawberry, is going to be higher. And the vegetable sprite, which again, the sprite is the placeholder, it's going to have a broccoli image set to it, will be lower. All right. Okay, we're going to use our new... Okay, let's start from scratch. Okay, so let's use our new sprite blocks to create a student sprite. So it says create a sprite variable called student, set the animation, and draw the sprite. What they fail to mention, because it says use the drop-down menu to select different sprites. Well, I'm not going to have any options, and we'll see what happens, and I'll explain why. So I'm going to first go to the sprites menu. I'm going to create a sprite, and I'm going to call it student. And then it tells me to set the animation of student. Okay, again, the sprite is the placeholder, setting the animation of the sprite or of that placeholder. Right now there's animation 1. Okay, so this one does have built-in. Okay, I was wrong. So there are some built-in. Let's go with Nico. And then we need to say draw sprites or else nothing will happen. All right, and we have a student. Okay, so we could pick many different options. We could go with Michaela. All right, and there we go. So you see different students. So what this does introduce, I thought they may have changed this year. You can go look at the different options in the animations tab, and there are these options to choose from. So because there are options to choose from, you have drop-down choices. If we did not have those options already loaded, we would have to go create them ourselves or pull them from code.org's vast collection of images, and we'll see that in just a moment. Okay, lesson 6. I'm going to click run, see what happens. So I've got 3 sprites that don't appear to have an animation set, 1 that does. All right, so it says this program draws 4 sprites to the screen, and 1 of them has an animation from the animations tab. Run the code, see what happens. We just did. Look in the animation tab to see what animations are available to you. I could also just click the drop down, but we could get a look at them over here. So I've got an alien, a bunny, a flybot, and a plain red one, which red plain would be better. So I set the animation of the bottom right sprite. So again, this is the placeholder. This is identifying the placeholder. This is the image that we're going to set, and we're able to set it to alien because alien exists. It's one of our assets now in our animation tab. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to group it in a way that this is the way I prefer to do it. Set the animation right after I create the sprite. You can go in and copy the sprite name and paste it. I don't know why that didn't work that time. I'll try it again. There we go. Copy, paste, copy, let me Control Z that. All right, bottom left sprite. Okay, and now I can pick different options. So let's go with the bunny, let's go with the flybot, and let's go with the red plane. And now they each have an image set. So all of them were just placeholders. Then we said what picture we wanted to go to it. Okay, this one a lot of times causes a lot of early confusion. This gets back to a key concept from earlier in the unit, that the order of the code is extremely important. Also, typos and or naming things can cause issues. So it looks like we've got a huge mess. We should be seeing soda, ice cream with the text "get ready" over it. And we've just got none of that really in the order it needs to be. We've got ice cream, but it's in the wrong spot. We've got a gray box, which tells us there's a placeholder there and nothing's assigned to it. And then our text is behind everything. So let's start with what's right about it. Okay, what's right about it is we call draw sprites after everything. We have a sprite called message. We set the animation of message. We have a sprite called drink. We set the animation of drink to soda. We have a sprite called dessert, and here's our first error, okay? We set the animation of drink to be ice cream, so that is why that is the ice cream cone and there's nothing there. So we need to change that to dessert. Let's reset and run. And now we've got our soda, we've got our ice cream. The only issue is those are above the text. We want them behind. Order matters, so let's move the message and the set animation of the message. So even though The draw sprite draws them. It draws them in the order that they are created. Let's create the message placeholder last and set the animation last, and that order shows up the way it should now. Okay, this one I think I probably already have submitted. And just to quickly run through and explain why each answer is correct. So this is the solution. So if you're walking through, you may want to rearrange. The goal is to look at the code and try to figure out which image matches, and I do like this activity because it makes you have to think about the code, think about the order. So the reason this is correct, we are going back to the background, so that's not a sprite, it's a command that just changes the color of our screen, and we make it sky blue. Then we say draw sprites, then we actually create and set the animations, but we don't tell it to draw sprites afterwards, so it's going to try to draw sprites right here, but there's nothing to draw, and then even though we create it, there's nothing telling it to actually put them on the screen, so all you're going to see is the blue background. In this one, if you notice, we have the blue background. We create a sprite called dog, and then we say draw sprites. So it draws a sprite. A sprite is initially a gray box. It's just a placeholder. We haven't set the animation yet when we tell it to draw, so that's why we don't actually see the dog. And then the second sprite, elk, and its animation being set, it is not showing up because it occurs after draw sprites. The third one is done correctly. The order is good. We draw the background, we create the dog, we set the animation for the dog, we create the elk placeholder, we set the animation, then we draw it. Okay, and then lastly, we are almost correct. We have the background, we create the dog, we set the animation, we draw sprites. Unfortunately, we then create the elk and set the animation after draw sprites, and it doesn't show up. Okay, and that, if anybody's wondering, it does tell us that's the correct answer. Okay, so some activities here to do a little practice. I'll walk through a few of them. So let's look at first 9A. Excuse me. All right, and with this one, it says, looking at the code below, we see that many sprites are created, and yet when we run the program, nothing shows up. Can you fix it? The initial issue was there was no draw sprites. So that was pretty much it. Call draw sprites and everything will show up. That one is pretty straightforward, I believe. All right, this next one, we want to fix the names. I will start this one over just so you can see the changes. So let me go back to my initial version. And I know this takes it a minute, so I do apologize. Okay, so right now it won't even run. I've got the red, that's the big uh-oh. I'm not even going to try to run. So also, this is not a good idea. Don't just name your sprites, sprite 1, sprite 2, sprite 3. Give them names that relate to what they're going to represent. So if it's like your main character, it could be character or hero, or if it's supposed to be a sprite that is representing an airplane, the name of the sprite could be airplane. So this is not a good example in terms of the way they're named, but it does correspond. We have sprites 1 through 6. We then set the animations of sprite 1 through 6, but we have an issue with 7. It's saying that unable to find Tyrannosaurus. One of my biggest pet peeves is when students that are using block mode don't take advantage of the drop down and they type in. It's so much easier and quicker to use the drop down, and it makes it error free. You're only going to be able to select images that exist. This student apparently, or person, could be a teacher that did this. They tried to type it in and they misspelled Tyrannosaurus, so it's looking for an animation that doesn't exist. If I click the drop down, I'm going to see the correct one. All right, I reset and I run. Okay, well now sprite 3 doesn't know what sun is. Let me look. All right, sun is capitalized. So again, small mistake, but it causes our program not to run, so let's fix that. Reset, run. Okay, now grass 2, what's the issue there? All right, if you're looking manually, there are no quotation marks, so it's now looking for a variable called grass 2, which doesn't exist. Again, go to the drop down, we've got grass 2. And then the last error we're going to have is that grass 3 doesn't exist. It skips to 4. Now we reset and run, and we've got everything. Okay, so a lot of little naming things, and that demonstrates some common mistakes, but when you're setting the animations, just use the drop down. It'll make it much more foolproof, and you won't have to worry about capitalization or spelling or anything like that. It'll be based on what is created here. So the other way I could have fixed it, technically I could have gone into my animations tab and changed the names here to fix it, but obviously do it in the code is the way I prefer to fix things. Okay, so we have finished that practice problem. All right, C, this is a good example because a very common mistake that happens with students and teachers alike that are new to this is just thinking, oh, it's called variable sprite. I need 3 sprites. Let me just drag that out 3 times. Well, kind of a weird conflict here. It does create 3 sprites, but when I set the animation sprite to cherry, it's only setting it to the one that was created most recently. Or is it the... Yeah, so it's kind of a little weird deal. So it's the one that's created most recently. So again, naming convention, this is not great, but just for time's sake, I could call this sprite, and then I could just call this one sprite 2 and sprite 3. Do as I say, not as I do, right? So I then would need to match those up. And now I've got unique names. Each one is referenced. I reset and run, and now I've got 3 cherries that show up. So the point of this one also, I only have one animation of a cherry, but I can make 3 cherries on the screen by just creating a different sprite and setting that same image to 3 different placeholders. Okay, so that is something you need to be aware of. Okay, the sprite order, I don't believe I did this one last time. We'll go ahead and walk through it. So something is wrong with the scene below. All right, we want to see our little critters in front of the plants, not behind. Again, it's just the order. It does not matter as much when I call the set animation. If you notice, the snail and ladybug are called last. It's when they're created. So let me create the snail after I create the cactus, and let me create the ladybug after I create both grass sprites. And now they're showing up in front. So lesson here is that it's determined on when the sprite is created, because that placeholder is then drawn to the scene. The setting, the animation, the order of that, not as important. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and look at the fish scene as well. This one says we've started you off with 3 different fish sprites, using anything else you want to make drawings like other sprites, customized to make a fun looking scene. A lot of stuff you could do. I am going to jump into something that later on when we get to animations can kind of cause a issue sometimes. But for now, you can also use, there are built-in backgrounds. So I could just do a background and make it blue, and that would certainly be fine. And now it's like it's underwater. And then I could draw some different shapes and put them in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sprite that I'm going to, I guess I somehow didn't do that. Okay, there we go. I'm going to call it BG for background. We don't want to call it background just because of the conflict that could cause with this function existing called background. So I'm going to call it BG. And then I'm going to go to my animations tab and I'm going to create a new animation. And look, there's a backgrounds menu. And there are probably, as I scroll through, I'm going to find some underwater background options. There's one that's like a shipwreck. This one looks pretty cool, so I'm going to choose that. And now I can go back to my code, and I'm going to go to my sprites menu, and I'm going to set the animation. Remember, the sprite is the placeholder, so I'm saying, hey, I want to set the picture to that placeholder, the background underwater. Just like before, we want to create our background and put it first. So that's why I did it up top, and then everything else is drawn on top of it. I'm going to leave it at that, but obviously you could go in. You could use some stuff we learned in the drawing lessons to create some cool shapes. You could go in and create more sprites to add into the scene, but I feel like this background does a pretty good job. Alrighty, and then combining ideas, this is just more of a freestyle activity, so I'm not going to go over that one, but if you have time and would like to jump in on that, it certainly can be a good way to pass some time and get more familiar with different properties you might want to play around with. All right, so we're going to finish our practices. And this will move us to the challenge. Okay, so this one wants us to use what we learned so far to create your own sprites. This example is just one way to complete the level. Decide for yourself what you want it to look like. I'm just going to recreate this, but certainly feel free to change it up as you see fit. There's a few things I'm going to show you here that we haven't covered yet that are, as I get to it, I'll kind of explain the what and the why. All right, so the things that I do have to do are add at least 2 animations, create at least 2 sprites in 2 different places, assign each sprite a different animation, draw them to the screen. So first I'm going to go to the Animations tab. Oh, and something happened with my mouse there. Okay. Sorry about that. I think I broke code.org for a second. Okay, let me go to animation. Alrighty, and I'm going to create an animation. I'm looking for a crab, and that's the one they had. So I'm going to create a crab. I'm going to look for a fork. And I'm going to look for a knife. Okay. And just for fun, I'm going to give this one a background. Again, those underwater backgrounds are really easy, so I've used that one already. Let's do this one. Okay. So I'm going to create a sprite. I'm going to call it BG. I'm going to set the animation of that placeholder to be that background. I'm then going to create another sprite. I'm going to call it crab. And that's my placeholder. Now I'm going to set the animation of that placeholder to be crab1. And it's at 200, 200. It's at the center. All right, in a moment, I'm going to have to play around with a couple of things. But for now, I'm going to have a fork. I want to set the animation of the fork to be the fork image, which is fork_1. And I had the knife, and I want to set the animation of the knife. Okay, and then lastly, I want to draw sprites. So this is not going to be the finished product, but I've got my scene, I've got the 3 sprites, but I want these utensils in the crab's claws. Also, I may want my crab to be more on the ground. So this is where I'm going to play around with X, Y values. So for the crab, I want to move the crab down a little bit. So let's change that Y value to a 300, see what happens. Okay, that looks a little bit better. And now I'm going to use my grid. Remember, it's the center of the sprite is where it's drawn. So I want to go to, what to me, 91, 241. So I forget proper mode. Fork is in the left hand as we're looking at it. So I guess it would technically be the crab's right hand. But 91, 241. So I'm going to find the fork, and I'm going to do 91, 241. And I'm going to reset. And there, now the fork is placed in the crab's claws. And then for the knife, I'm going to come right here to kind of the middle, 307, 237. All right, again, using that grid, reset, run. Okay, and there I can place those objects there. All right, so use the grid as your friend, get rid of those. And if you want to shift them around a little bit more, you can move them up, move them down. But using that XY placement allows us to put sprites where we want to. Okay, these challenges, the kite has become a troublesome one over the years. This one is showing you how to upload an image. I'll try my best to walk through this, but this has caused some issues. So when I did this in the past, I was able to find an image of a kite, and I loaded it, it's there already. So when I run, it has a background. It is more difficult than you would realize to find a compatible kite image. But if I do a Google search and do kite image transparent background, you can tell that code.org has been used. And some that are supposed to be transparent are not. And if I do an image search, I could see different options. Some, again, are supposed to be clear, and then you have to have the right size and all this fun stuff. So let's try this one. All right, 522 by 600. Let me save image as, I'm just going to call this kite. It's a JPEG. It's going to my downloads. Let's see if this will work. All right, so I'm going to go to my animations tab. I'm going to create a new animation, upload image, and then if I go to downloads, I just had that one open. All right, so it's showing up. So now this is called kite.jpg. So if I wanted to change that, all right, it's going to show, but again, it is not transparent. It's kind of in the wrong spot. But in the animation tab, I can fix that a little bit. So down here, I've got a primary and a secondary color. I've also got a dithering tool, which can help remove the background. So what I can do is I can come to this white area. I can go to the paint bucket actually first, come to a white area and right click. And what that does is it actually allows you to remove the background. So if I go back to my code now, reset and run, if you notice, a lot of that is gone away now. So I may want to shift this as well. I probably want to move it over and down. So there I can kind of see the kite. So for time's sake, I'm not going to make you watch me do this, but I could then go in, and now I maybe want to switch to the pen tool, and I can change the size of the pen for the number of pixels, and this is where you get a little bit more specific. And again, I'm right clicking, and now you can go in and really, this one's not the best. Those little bows make it difficult, but you can see how you could go in and erase the background. I'm not a huge fan of importing images from online. There's file type requirements. It needs to be a JPEG or a PNG. Also, there's a size requirement. I think it has to be 100 KB or less. So it's much easier to just use the library of images that code.org has. Or you can also sometimes link to an image, which that is a little bit different, and that is a lot easier as well. All right, so again, if I reset and run, some of those changes I made, you can see how that would work. Okay. All right, challenge B. It wants me to create one from scratch. So what I did, again, in the animation tab, you can see my wonderful artwork. You can actually create sprites, or not sprites, but create animations in the animations tab. You just have to click new animation, draw your own. And again, if you want to give it a background like I did there, go to the paint bucket. You can change the colors right here. So if I want to change let's say I want to change primary, and I want to make it, let me make it like a green. And now I click. All right, well now I've got a green background. And now let's say I want to make my character like pink. Okay, I can change it there, and then I can go to my pen tool, and now I can draw. And because last time I'd already chosen that option, you can kind of change the size and the width. And this is animation 3, so I could go back now, change my character to animation 3 that now exists, run it, and I've got a little character there. So again, this one you can play around with it, but the idea is to get you to explore this. Please have fun creating your images, but I have seen a lot of students over the years get lost in this. So you have to learn to stop yourself if you start getting too detailed with creating the pixelized characters. All right, so that finishes that challenge. All right, add your own characters. So again, challenge C. Use the animation tab to draw your own and add them to the scene. So exactly the same thing that we just did. So again, you would get a new animation, draw your own. Because the scene, when I run it, is already black, perhaps I want to give this a black background. And then, again, let's say I want to draw like a little green alien. I can go and, draw the traditional. Oh, this is not good. The green alien stick man. And we can fill that in now. And now I can go back and change my color to black. And I can get, let me undo that. I do not want the paint bucket. So good time to show you, again, a reminder, use Control Z. I want to go back to the pen tool for those eyes. Okay. And I have a little alien. I probably should give it a more proper name, so you can change the name. So I'm going to call it Alien. And now I can set the animation of that first character to Alien. And there you can see the character that I drew. And because I used a black background, it blends in nicely. You could do the same thing for character 2, come up with a different alien. Another option, let's say I want to do something similar but not quite. Let's say I want to make a pink alien. I can copy this and just call this one Alien 2. And now, let's say I want to change the color to more of a pink. I can use that paint tool, change that color, and now I set the animation of that placeholder character 2 to Alien 2. Okay, and I have 2. I also could set it to that first one, and even though I have 2 sprites, I could just have 2 aliens, and they're both green. So again, you can play around with that. Okay, the last couple are free play challenges. So if you have questions and want to play around with those, let me know. But there's a lot of existing sprites, so have fun with those. But for my requirements, if you can do really just A and B, I think you have it down enough. And don't get so caught up on A. If you have a hard time getting an image to download and getting it to upload, just let me know and I can try to help you out.